I welcome you all to the educational session on humorous speech contest and the speech evaluation contest at the Deccan Toastmasters Club. We are really glad that you tuned into the meeting today morning. And one thing for sure is that you're going to have a lot of fun and learn a lot about humorous speech and evaluations until the end of the session. I would also like to welcome with a lot of gratitude, our panelists for today, Toastmaster Harold Fernandez and Toastmaster Ashraf Ali Jagirdar. Thank you so much, Toastmaster Harold and Toastmaster Ashraf, for joining us today. Can we have a huge round of applause for our panelists for today? Thank you so much. And to all the guests who have tuned in, again, we are really glad that you joined us. Please stay tuned till the end of the meeting. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our area director of area P5, Toastmaster Milind Patwardhan. Thank you for tuning in, sir. All right. It's a wonderful Sunday morning, right? And we have gathered here today to learn more about contests. Now, when we speak about contests, we speak about the pressure that we have to perform into because the clock is always ticking. The audience are looking at us. We kind of tend to be nervous on the event day, delivering our speech, delivering our content, and the clock is ticking, right? We have to be at our best on the event day. But for me, a contest is a journey of being well prepared with our scripts, with our delivery. And I think from a 1 month down the line, the time that we prepare ourselves with for the contest, for the 1 month is the most important learning experience that we can have for this journey of being a better version of ourselves and being a better speaker. And in this journey, when we talk about two important elements, one is the humor and the evaluation. And I mean, how important are these elements for our life as well? We are, in a worrisome situation, or when we are not feeling as good as we are, and someone cracks a punch or a joke, it lightens up the entire atmosphere, right? And the second element is evaluation. When we talk about evaluation, we talk about continuously improving ourselves. We talk about becoming a better version of the speaker that we were yesterday. So these two important elements will be addressed in today's educational session. So without further ado, let us begin with the educational session for today. And first up, we are going to have the humorous speech contest, which is going to be delivered by Toastmaster Harold Fernandez. Toastmaster Harold Fernandez is a software technologist for over 2 decades and has served in various leadership roles. He is currently consulting on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and is also a coach for meditation and mindfulness. Toastmaster Harold Fernandez is the first runner-up at the International Speech Contest at Eloquence 2019 at the District 98 level. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome our first panelist for today, a person who speaks in a way that entertains the entire audience and an excellent speaker, Toastmaster Harold Fernandez. Toastmaster Harold, over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Excellent. Thanks, Aditya, for that fantastic introduction. I had a very difficult choice this morning before attending this educational session. I had to decide, should I wear pants? Oh, and in the interest of full disclosure, you can't see my pants, but I'm wearing them nevertheless. But now, let me ask you as an audience. I want everyone to switch on their screens so that I can take a look. And if I were to ask you as the audience members to stand up, how many of you would be wearing formals at a formal occasion like this? And that's the challenge, right? That's the thing that we have. And I can see now Aditya and Ruchi are probably squirming. They're like, oh my God, Harold, we asked for a session on the humorous speech contest, but this is not the kind of humor that we are talking about. Interestingly enough, Walmart has said that actually the sales of tops, formal shirts, formal tops for both men and women are far exceeding the sales of formal bottoms, pants and trousers and so on. So basically, the lockdown has created a norm where we are wearing formal tops and then likely we are wearing pajamas at the bottom. So if you really wanted to find out how many audience members are not formally dressed, you could do this simple test. Ask everyone to switch on their videos and then play the national anthem. You'll get a true picture of the audience altogether. And not just that, the strange thing is that even on national television, not in our country, I'm not aware of any instances in our country, but I know for a fact that on the morning show on the ABC network, which is the American second largest network, millions of viewers watch this show. There was a reporter who showed up without trousers. Actually, without trousers, he was wearing shorts. But that's not the best part. The joke was he was wearing a formal suit. He was wearing a full suit and a tie and really short shorts. And there was a scene where you could see his legs. This is what the pandemic, this is what working from home has reduced us to. Okay, so let's begin with this. Let's begin with the educational session itself. Let's move to the next slide, please. So to write a humorous speech and to deliver a funny speech, you first need to understand what it is that makes people laugh. Right? Why do we laugh? What causes us to burst into laughter? What causes us to smile? There's a ton of research, and all of it boils down to one simple fact. Laughter is wired into our system. We are wired to laugh as a means to show our fellow humans that a situation is non-threatening or that we are non-threatening. It's actually a way of bonding. And that is why, if you notice, we laugh more when there are others around us who are laughing, because we are all sharing that experience and sharing this biological connection which says that I'm not threatening you in any way. And that's why the laughter comes at the expense of a surprise which is violated expectations. So you're expecting something and then that expectation is violated, right? So that is what causes us to laugh. However, there's a very beautiful line between what is a benign violated expectation, that is what is at the edge of our expectation, and what is way outside the expectation. So there's a fine line between humor and offense. And as a person who wants to write a humorous speech, you have to learn to navigate that fine line. And how do we do that? We'll take a look at that during the session. The other thing is that it's a way to reinterpret, a way of looking at a hard truth, but in a different way. So for example, I'll give an example. You know, at the beginning of this lockdown, just when we began, my family was really lucky. We got a brand new dishwasher just in time. Me. I am the designated dishwasher at our home. Right? So that's a violated expectation. I can guarantee you that most of you did not imagine that the dishwasher was going to be me. So this is how we get people to smile, to laugh, or this is how we violate people's expectations, your audience's expectations. But you have to do it in a way, as I said, that does not cross over the line into offensive or too much into offensive. Obviously, it's at the edge. It has to be slightly edgy. It has to be slightly offensive, but not too far into that, into the offensive territory. Next slide, please. So we begin with choosing a topic. Right? How do you choose a topic for this? But before you choose a topic, you have to understand your audience, because humor is audience specific. An American audience has a very different conception of humor. And even when I say American, I'm generalizing. The folks on the East Coast probably laugh at different things than the folks on the West Coast in any country for that matter. So before you begin, you have to understand your audience, understand the constitution of the audience. Like, who is it? Is it so? If it's all Toastmasters, as it's likely to be in our case, typically you know that you understand a general Toastmaster. You have an idea of the persona of someone who is a Toastmasters audience member. But even there, if you're delivering a speech to your club, you're looking for something specific, right? You know your club in and out, and you know what kind of humor is going to work with them. So that's important. What's the age of the audience? What's the constitution of the audience? What does the audience, what do the audience members have in common apart from Toastmasters? Perhaps they are all married, so that can become a theme. Perhaps they're all working professionals, so that's another theme. Like the boss humor that can appeal to a large segment of the audience. Whatever it is, if you want to make people laugh, you have to make sure that you take the audience into consideration and you understand what is going to appeal to this specific audience when it comes to humor. And this causes an additional challenge, which is that at every stage, when you move from club to area to division and to district, as you move towards the district level, you'll find that the composition of the audience becomes more diffused as the audience becomes larger. So if you want to reach the district, you have to choose a topic that will appeal to the district level audience as well. So if you plan ahead, you are more likely to succeeding at the future levels. The second thing is a topic, a theme. What kind of topic could you choose? Like I've listed out a few here. COVID-19 is very common, and that's the reason why I moved into this whole pants jazz right now. So COVID-19, lockdown, what is the impact of that on our lives? What are the funny new things that are happening as a result of these? Obviously, there are a lot of serious, important, and perhaps even tragic things that are happening on the COVID front. But equally, there are some really strange, some confusing, and some funny things that are happening. And those are the things that you can target. Work from home. Work from home is a rich opportunity for humor all over the place. Online meetings specifically, that's another opportunity. These are some of the new topics, new opportunities that I can think of. But whatever it is, you can brainstorm and come up with an idea or topic or a theme that works for you. But you still need to make sure that you follow the speech structure. You have the same opening body conclusion structure that is used for standard speeches, that your speech has universal appeal. That is the large, as I mentioned, larger audience. And if you can use personal experience and ideally self-deprecating humor, nothing like it. Make yourself the butt of jokes, and trust me, you'll have the audience eating out of your hand. Next slide, please. So how does one actually be funny? What is the technique? The principle, as I said, is violating expectations, but the technique is setup and punchline. So you set up an expectation, a scene, a setting, and then you deliver the punchline. So I gave you the example. At the beginning of the lockdown, my family was really lucky. We had a brand new dishwasher. Right? That's the setup. And the expectation there is, oh, there is a dishwashing machine. They bought a machine in time, or through some serendipity, they received a machine. And the punchline then is that yours truly is the dishwasher. So create the setup and have a punchline. Another tip here is, another part of the approach is, take a bad situation and make it worse. Like in the speech that I gave for eloquence, I did that. Like I took a bad situation. The bad situation was that I changed jobs. I had a crazy boss. I promised something. I had to deliver a document. And then the situation became progressively worse, if you've seen that speech. This is actually something, again, that violates expectation and will make your audience chuckle, smile, or laugh. As a practice, you will need to deliver a series, you'll need to develop a series of sketches that you're comfortable with. So which means that you will need to find what works for you, what makes you laugh, and then make a bank of those and then figure out how you can use them in sometimes you find something that's happening in your life that's funny. You can take that and you can then use that situation in your speech. You can sometimes translate those situations to your specific situation in your speech. So make a list of sketches, take a look around and find out what's making you laugh, what's making other people laugh, what are the funny situations that are happening. So you keep your eyes open and you try to figure out what's making people laugh or what's making you laugh, and you keep a track of all those. Excuse me, let me just grab a glass of water. So you find these things and then you have a bank of sketches that you can use. So this is an ongoing process. And by the way, this is how all the stand-up comedians do it. All the great stand-up comedians have one aspect which they do. You may see on YouTube or you may have visited one of their concerts and you see that they've delivered a 1 hour humorous section or segment. But the truth is, to come up with that 1 hour of content, they've taken 6 months or a year. And they take a series of sketches, they go to small clubs where they get everyone to promise that they will not be recorded. And then they take their content and deliver it and see how the audience responds to each of those. So if you've seen 1 hour of content, the fact is that there were actually 10 hours worth of content which has been whittled down to that 1 hour. So comedians, stand-up comedians specifically, are continuously testing their material to very small audiences, sometimes probably personal audiences as well, before they come up with that large big bang show that they're doing. And you need to do the same. You need to, whatever content that you do come up with, practice it with your friends, practice it with your family, practice it during your speeches, and then find out what works and what doesn't work. So sometimes there might be content that works for a general audience, but that may not work for you. You drop that, let that be. Use the content that flows, allows you to flow with your natural style. There are different styles that people have, different styles that speakers have, and you have to understand what kind of humor goes with your natural style. To give an example, there are some speakers who are over the top. Like in my club, we have got a guy called Taha. So everything he does, the moment he lands on stage, he elicits a smile, but it's over the top. He'll be jumping around on the stage all the time. Whereas my style of humor is more subdued, more laid back, more, tongue in cheek, that kind, more taciturn kind of style. So use that. The other thing is, don't telegraph your punchline. Don't give any hint that you are going to be delivering your punchline. It has to come as a surprise. And for that reason, keep a straight face. Or, you might smile, but if you're smiling all the time or you're laughing at your own joke, that's not going to work. You have to be telling a story that elicits laughter from the audience while you are delivering it with all seriousness. And there are a lot of movies and a lot of stand-up comedians who do this really well. Move to the next slide, please. Okay. Now, can you tell me what this is? Who knows? You can type it into a chat window, or if we have that option. What is this? Who's this character? Okay. Am I alone right now? Frankenstein. Okay. Frankenstein monster. Yes, Shirish. Shirish has caught the real definition of. So it is true. It is Frankenstein's monster. And this is something that typically, there's some confusion about. So Dr. Frankenstein is the doctor who creates this monster. And the way this monster is created is he basically visits some kind of morgue, and he takes different body parts and he sews them together, and he does things. It's a horror story, 18th century. Mary Shelley wrote this. I don't remember the title of the book, but I believe it is Dr. Frankenstein. What has this got to do with speechcraft or speeches, what that we deliver? Next slide, please. Our speeches are often like Frankenstein's monster. They come across as something that is put together but does not flow naturally, does not flow beautifully. And this aspect that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that we need to avoid this Frankenstein's monster phenomenon, is really important when it comes to speeches. And it's true of all speeches, but it's equally true of humorous speeches that we're delivering. You need to ensure that your speech makes sense as a whole, not that it is a bunch of disjointed jokes, a bunch of disjointed parts that have no connection with each other. So you have to have either an overarching theme or a common story that ties all your gags, your jokes, your punchlines, the setup, and everything. Put it together. Yeah. That's important. So you need, if you need help, get help from a mentor on this and do it. Another part which is important when it comes to approach and delivery is use your natural style, play to your strengths. As I said, you might be someone who is high energy and over the top. You might be someone who is laid back and taciturn. You might even be shy, and you can use your shyness to your advantage. So most of you might not be aware that I'm an introvert and a massive one at that. And I'm quite shy, especially when it comes to coming on screen. So I was being honest when I said that I'm nervous, but luckily I was born with a face, and this has nothing to do with me. I have to thank my parents for whatever genetic mix-up happened there, and thank them for the fact that no matter what I'm feeling inside, it doesn't show on my face. It's as if the nerves in my body are not connected to my face at some level. Use simple language. Use a conversational style. When you're talking with friends, the way you have a conversation, that's the kind of speech you need to use when you're delivering a speech, especially for the humorous speech content. You have to connect with your audience. For a formal speech, if you're making a presentation to your CXO level, your board, it's a very different thing. There you can afford to be formal. But in a humorous speech, when you're delivering, you need to use language that connects immediately. You need to keep it conversational. You need to keep it friendly. So do that. Be yourself. It's okay to, if you're sweating, so much the better. Use that in your humor, right? If you're feeling anxious, use that. Use all that energy. Use all that crazy aspect in your humorous speech. Use props if you can. And yesterday, as I told you, I saw the speech yesterday that was delivered, the world champion speech, the winning speech, and he used the camera as a prop. I thought that was fantastic. Let's leave the other aspects aside, but purely from the perspective of a prop, he used the camera phenomenally as a prop. And so there are different ways in which you can use props, but be aware that your prop has to add value. Again, the principle of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. If your prop appears to be forced, and I've noticed a lot of Toastmasters tend to do this, or tend to fear that, oh no, if I don't use a prop, somehow my speech may not have the same kind of impact. Yes, obviously using a good prop appropriately will add value, but using a prop badly will detract from your speech. So be clear and be careful about the way you use the prop, the way you use the stage, the way you use the camera now, especially now that it's going to be online. You can use the camera for humor. Like I remember in Ashraf's speech, he spoke about the size of his nose, and he brought his fingers to the camera, like when he was doing his speech at the district. So using the camera, using whatever props you can make a huge difference to what you're delivering in your speech. Next slide, please. Okay. You can see where the bat of this batsman is, right? So we're talking about practice now. Yeah, next slide. How does one practice? And why am I talking about practice? If you want to deliver a humorous speech, you have to know it inside out, and you have to know it in your bones, so that you can focus on the delivery and not just on the content. This is really important. So if you're expecting to be funny, you have to have memorized your speech through and through, and you have to have delivered it and practiced it so that you can wake up from your sleep and deliver a speech. That's the only real way for you to be able to deliver it, confidently and in a way that flows. Practice for once a day minimum. That's what typically what I do. Then record your video, obviously get feedback, and remember that when you get feedback, some aspects of those feedback may not work for you. You're the judge. You have to decide whether something works for you or not. As I said, you have to use your natural style. Sometimes you will receive some feedback that no matter what you do does not work for you. At that time, it's better to err on the side of the ease of delivery of the speech than on the side of incorporating the feedback. I'm not saying don't pay attention to the feedback. Definitely do that, but make sure that it's easier for you to deliver a speech than for you to incorporate some feedback that takes you too far away from your natural style. Okay, next slide, please. This is about the actual judging. And here's something surprising that perhaps, those who are attempting this competition are not aware. Yeah, next slide, please. If you notice, there's only one difference between this ballot and the international speech judges guide and ballot. And that is this audience response. You can see there's a segment called audience response. And that accounts for 15% of the overall criteria for judging, which means that your speech cannot just be a series of jokes that are disconnected. It has to be a speech. You have to use all the elements of a speech. You have to develop your speech. Your speech has to be effective. It has to be appropriate for the audience. Your body language, your vocal variety, your movement, all of these things matter. So your speech has to be holistic or whole, and appropriate as a complete speech. So you need to pay attention to this aspect as well. The other thing I notice is that there's a lot of anxiety in a competition, which is typically like, there are so many criteria. If you think about it, there's way too much here, right? If you take under each of these, like under speech development, there are 4 different sub criteria. So if you try to cater to all of these, you're going to go crazy. Your head is going to explode. And let me also tell you that most judges are human. They will evaluate your speech holistically, just as you deliver it holistically. I've seen this again and again. I have not judged a lot of competitions, but whichever ones I have judged, I have seen that ultimately the holistic view of your speech has a huge impact on how the judges evaluate all of these criteria. A good judge, a great judge will obviously be able to differentiate, but the overall speech makes a huge difference. So don't worry about the aspects, incorporate them. Don't worry about this. Make sure that your speech makes sense as a whole, and practice and leave the rest to the delivery. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. This is our mental game, as I was saying. So how does one deal with the competition? Typically, my way is to look at it as I'm competing with myself. That's how I allay my fear or my anxiety. The only person who needs to think about the competition is me. Meaning, I'm only competing with myself. I do not think about the other members. It's my job to do better than I did the last time. And that's all. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking at the other speakers. Some of you might have a different approach of philosophy, and that's fine. But I'm sharing something here that victory is simply going up there and doing the best that you can. So this is, if I have to leave you with one thought here about the mental game, I would say do this. And the second thing, of course, is I meditate before I deliver a speech so that I'm in the zone. I don't talk to people. But I know that other speakers, they like to speak so that they're relaxed. So I'm an introvert, so I sit quietly in a corner and that helps me. But extroverts obviously will prefer to socialize and feel better. Yeah. Next slide, please. How many of you don't know this guy? Like, let's see, show of hands. Right? Yeah. Next slide. I'm not even going to, suggest. So obviously, Russell Peters. Anyone guess? Any guesses how much money this guy makes per year, approximately? Yeah, no, it's okay. Move to the next slide. Yeah, you can put it in the chat. Yeah. How much money does this guy make? Just a guess, wild guess. Yeah, 15 million. You hit the nail. 15, 20 million a year through all his concerts. I saw a YouTube video of Russell where he said that he's afraid of competition. He's nervous when it comes to competing. So a guy who spent like 25 or 30 years feels the anxiety. So definitely, you and I are going to feel that. And it's important then to compete simply to overcome this thing, simply to keep wrestling with this inner demon, this inner anxiety. Some of the other advantages obviously are that, like when I competed at the district level, it was like a fast track course in public speaking because I stretched myself, and you'll get that your nervous energy will take you to the level where you're performing your best. Uh, in some cases, obviously, your nervous energy will take you over the edge, and at that time, you have to remind yourself that it's okay. I'm just competing with myself. But you'll get great feedback from a whole lot of people. You'll be talking to different types of audiences, different sizes of audiences. You're going to upgrade your skill. You're going to learn new skills. It's going to be amazing to participate in the contest. So I strongly urge all of you, go the whole hog, deliver a fabulous speech, get feedback, compete, sweat it out, and keep a recording for posterity so that you'll know how you did. Yeah, next slide. That's it. That's all I have to say. So to recap, I would say we laugh when expectations are violated. Don't violate the expectation to the extent that you cross over into the area of offensiveness. Write a holistic speech. Don't worry about judging. Do your best. Remember that you're just competing with yourself, and have fun studying humor, studying other great speakers and great funny authors, great stand-up comedians, and use ideas. Don't pick material, but use ideas, use concepts in your speeches, and take your humor to the next level. So I'm done with the delivery itself. I would like to field any questions if.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Harold, for a thoroughly entertaining and informative session. I'm sure all of us are going to get our humor game going very, very soon. I would request the audience members to please write in your questions to me on a personal chat. I will direct them in turn to Toastmaster Harold. Toastmaster Harold, we already have a few questions for you. And the
Awesome.
first question I would like to ask you, it is from Toastmaster Rishikesh Shirsagar. And he says, how can a non-witty person deliver a humorous speech? What are the things that a non-witty person
Excellent. Yeah.
needs
So,
to do?
Rishikesh, if I have to ask you this question, has anything funny happened to you in your life that you've seen or that has happened to you? Right? Witticisms and wit is only one aspect of humor. There are many different other aspects of humor. There are different forms of humor. There is the slapstick humor. There is the situational humor, which we see in all our situational comedies, as it's called. And there's the humor of wit, the humor of play of language. And let me tell you that the form of humor that appeals the most is a combination of situational and slapstick. Yeah. So witty humor appeals to a very intelligent audience. And let me also tell you that uh, most audiences are not in that category, in the sense that the wit that we're talking about, the kind of challenge we're talking about specifically when it comes to the appropriate use of language, the play of language requires you to speak in the first, the mother tongue for the audience. And our audience is not English speaking audience, in the sense that English is our second language, it's our third language. So if you're not witty, or you think that you're not witty, trust me, if you are speaking in Marathi, if that's your mother tongue, you would definitely have a different approach to the wit. Use situational and use slapstick. Use a combination of these two. Definitely something that will work for you. I hope that answers your question. That's an excellent one. Thanks, Rishikesh.
Thank you, Toastmaster Harold. The next question is from distinguished Toastmaster Shirish Nadkar, and he says, could you please give us some examples of setup and punchlines?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you an example. During the ISC, I delivered a sentence where I said, there was a situation where it became progressively worse, and finally my boss yelled at me. So that was the setup. And I delivered a punchline, and I'll tell you how the punchline evolved as well. I said, you remember how something comes back from the past to bite you in the, pardon my French, ass. I said the word ass. And DTM Usha, who is one of the mentors at our club, and she's a fabulous speaker, she said, Harold, if you use the word ass here, you may be offending some people. So it was not funny. This sentence wasn't actually funny. And I thought about it and said, I want the bite of this sentence, the word bite you on the, I liked that. And then it struck me, what if I replace it with, do you remember the situation where something comes back from the past to bite you on the asteroid belt? And, I played with that and that became the punchline. So it was, it worked on two levels. The audience, I got a huge rise from all the audiences that I worked with because they knew that I meant the word, again, pardon my French, ass. But I skirted that line between propriety and impropriety and said asteroid belt. So, it was a play on words. So this is one example of of a punchline that evolved naturally thanks to some feedback that I got. I didn't even expect. There's another one that I used in the speech where I said that, you remember, I write this. I was a document writer. I was a technical writer. So I used an example. I was kind of thinking, how do I explain the concept of a technical writer, a documentation guy, in a simple way that appeals to every person, that everyone can understand? And I suddenly remembered that, in this week, when we unpack a cell phone, right? We get the new smartphone, you unpack it, and then you pick up those papers. And what do we do with those papers? We throw them away, right? So that's something. So I did the whole dramatization. I said, you open your box, you take out those papers and you throw them away. So that was like, okay, this guy was doing the kind of work that gets thrown away by everyone who receives that. So that was another example of a punchline. So you do a setup, you're building an expectation, and then you violate that expectation by one of these. There's a couple of examples that I could think of.
Thank you, Toastmaster Harold. The next question is from Toastmaster Tanvi Khair. She says, if a punchline doesn't elicit a laugh, which is the scariest moment for a speaker on the stage, how do we handle that and get on with our speech?
Fantastic question. Yeah. So at that point, you can turn the punchline around towards yourself. So for example, if something doesn't work, something is not funny, you can look back at yourself, and at that moment, crack a joke at your own expense. So you could say, for example, yeah, I know they told me that I was going to be funny, but unfortunately, obviously, you guys don't think that. Or, you turn it around and you crack a joke at your own expense. And if you practice this, you'll learn very quickly to crack a joke at your own expense. And trust me, at my expense, I know there are a lot of jokes that can be cracked, right? We all are in that space where there are things that we don't do well. So turn it around, crack a joke at your own expense, using that situation that's happening at that moment.
Thank you again, Toastmaster Harold. The next question is from our area director, Toastmaster Milind Patwardhan. He asks, how important is big stage movement for a humorous speech?
It depends on the plot. It's an excellent question. I would say it depends on the context of your speech. So if your speech requires you to move, or if you can incorporate a lot of stage movement into your speech based on the situation, that's great. Again, if I refer back to the ISC speech that I had, I wanted to differentiate between the time when I was struggling with the document that I was writing. There was a document that I was wrestling with, which my boss used to rip apart. Every time I went to him, he would give me more comments the next time, and that scared. And this actually happened, scared the pants off me at that time, as I recall. So I wanted to show that this is the spot where I'm kind of sweating it out. This is the meeting room at the office, which was a different location to the left of my stage, and towards the right of my stage where I was making a point. So definitely it was possible because it was an office setting, and in an office setting you are moving around. There are conference rooms, there are you have your work desk, and then you have other spaces. So I wanted to make use of that. Definitely it adds a lot of value, in my opinion, to move on the stage, but it has to be, again, part of the whole. Sometimes I've noticed that there is movement for its own sake, and this doesn't make sense, in my opinion. Just walking around on stage randomly probably does not add real value to that. So one needs to think about how to incorporate the stage movement into the story. That's where you get the most punch, in my opinion.
Thank you. The next question is again from distinguished Toastmaster Shirish, and he asks, do we pause for the audience to laugh at our jokes?
Okay, that's a good one. And a scary one too, Sirish, because what if you pause and there's no laughs? Right? What happens then? Yes. So you do pause for the audience to laugh, and you take into account the amount of time it takes. So when I delivered my speech at my club, the laughter would end in 2 or 3 seconds. But at the district level, when there are 1,000 people in the audience, it is to take between 10 to 15 seconds for the laughter to die down. And it's important to wait till the almost till the end, so that your audience can listen to what you're saying next. Because if they miss what you're saying next, then the next setup is flawed, right? And then the next punchline will suffer. So yes, definitely you need to pause, and you need to make sure that you give it enough time based on that audience, which makes time management in humorous speeches a bit of a challenge. It's not easy. It's not a straightforward speech, right? Excellent question, Shirish. Thanks.
Thanks, Aral. The next question is actually by two people, Toastmaster Amit and Toastmaster Aniket. They ask, how do you know that a material or an idea is a humor material? And then how do you ensure that at the end of the day, you're giving a beautiful message to the audience through your speech?
Okay, excellent. This is also a great question. And I would say that, first of all, it has to be something that you find funny. If there's something that you don't laugh at, the chances are that it's not going to work for your audience altogether. So first proof, I find it funny. Second proof, I experiment with an audience, my family members, as I told you, friends, colleagues. I do the setup, I do the punchline at an informal. Let's say you're waiting for a meeting, you just do this, and you see what kind of a response you get. You experiment. So it's a then when you know that, okay, I've got these five settings, I've got these five jokes, or I've got these five situations, and two of them people laugh no matter what, and three of them, it's lukewarm, nobody laughed, nobody got it. In fact, if nobody got it with your colleagues, you can just pretend it was a serious story. Nobody would even know, right? Nobody, don't tell them that you're going to crack a joke, or now I'm going to tell you a joke. No, just weave it into your conversation and test. All the great comedians do this. So definitely test, and that's how you'll know that it's appropriate. Now, what about a message? The message part of things works as a general speech would. You can choose not to have a message, by the way, for a humorous speech. But if you do choose to have a message, then that has to be part of your standard, the standard mechanism of your speech writing. You need to have that as part of whatever theme you're talking about. Like if you're talking about work from home and your message is always wear your pants, and your message can be funny, by the way. Yeah? So you can use that. That's the theme. That's going to be the final punchline where you get the big audience applause, and then you build up on that theme throughout your speech. So it could be a funny message as well, as much as it may be a serious or emotional, inspirational message. That's a whole different topic. It needs a new educational session for the inspirational part.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Harold. I'm afraid due to the paucity of time, we will have to move on with the session as of now. We do have a lot of questions that we have got, and what we can do is record the questions and also ask you later offline. Hope that will be okay for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Harold. Thanks a lot. Can we have a huge round of applause for Toastmaster Harold Fernandez on how to craft and deliver a humor speech? It is always fun listening to you, Toastmaster Harold. The way you speak is thoroughly entertaining, and thank you for the whole lot of information that you have given us today. Please keep the round of applause going. He does deserve a huge round of applause. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
for
again.
inviting me. It has been, it's been my pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Now we have a break for a couple of minutes. We can break for 2 minutes and then join. It's 11:45. So by 11:47, let us quickly tune into the session again. We have a thoroughly entertaining session lined up. That is the session on evaluation speech contest, or speech evaluation contest rather. So let's meet soon. Excellent speaker in our panel. He is Toastmaster Ashraf Ali Jagirdar. Toastmaster Ashraf Ali is a mechanical engineer by education, a software architect by profession, and a speaker by passion. He has about 13 years of experience in the technology industry and is currently employed with Bentley Systems. Ashraf Ali regularly participates in various Toastmasters contests and has had a fortune to win many of them. He was the first runner-up in the International Speech Contest 2018 at district level, Eloquence 2018. He was also the first runner-up in the Speech Evaluation Contest 2020 at district level, District 98. Again, ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, please help me welcome our next panelist, our second panelist of the day, Toastmaster Ashraf Ali Jagirdar, on Learn to Evaluate and Evaluate to Learn. Learn to Evaluate, Evaluate to Learn. Toastmaster Ashraf Ali Jagirdar, over to you.
Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible and visible.
Thank you. From the time I won the division contest, evaluation contest in November last year, people have been asking me this question. And I too have asked a lot of Toastmasters these questions when I was a new member. How to prepare for evaluation. Now, over the course of time, by the way, I'm a Toastmaster from the last 5 years. So over the course of this time, I have discovered an answer to this question. Would you like to know the answer? I see people nodding. Okay. So hold your breath. The answer will be on the screen. Okay. 1, 2, 3. The answer is do not prepare for evaluation. I repeat, do not prepare for evaluation. I see a lot of faces in the audience, people nodding. Some people are rolling their eyes. Perhaps Aditya and Ruchi are now regretting their decision to invite me for this session. Hold on, give me a chance. We still have, I think, 13 minutes. I'll try to convince you. Okay. Shall I begin? Okay, let's learn evaluation. Good afternoon, fellow Toastmasters and guests. How many of you like cricket in the audience or don't like cricket? Let me ask that question. Yes. As Indians, cricket is our DNA. It's a religion in this country. If you want to categorize people based on their cricketing enthusiasm or experience or knowledge, there are 3 groups primarily. Number 1 is the people who enjoy cricket, who enjoy when the batsman hits a 6, when a bowler takes a wicket, and there is aggression on the field. But they are just limited to that. They don't understand the nitty-gritties of the game. My mother is one of them. She enjoys cricket as much as I do, but she cannot differentiate between a test match, a one-day match, and a T20. It's all the same for us. But nevertheless, she has fun watching, and I too have fun watching with her. So she falls in this enjoy cricket category, and there are very few people here. We might call them novice fans. Number 2 are readers and analysts. A majority of the people fall in this category. Most of us who have seldom played cricket, I mean the hardball one, okay, not the tennis ball. Have never padded themselves, never used as gloves and anything, but they know cricket in and out. They know about its history, they know about its stats, they know about when the match was played, who is the best bowler, what is a carom ball, what is a dusra. They know everything because they read a lot and they discuss a lot. And majority of us fall in this category, by the way. And third is the actual cricketers, the players who have played the game, formally played the game. Who have played Ranji or maybe at the school level, district level, some sort of a formal experience. Now, as cricket enthusiasts, you'll all agree that we like to discuss about cricket very often and have arguments and debates. And with the advent of WhatsApp, it has been the debates are like everywhere, anytime and every time. However, I have a question for you. Out of these 3 categories, whose opinion would be more sensible, or would make more sense, or would be well qualified or well informed out of these three categories? You can. Sorry, can you hear me? Hello, am
Yes.
I audible?
Yes, we can hear you, Toastmaster Ashraf Ali.
Yeah, there is a power cut. Yeah, there is a power cut at my end. So
You're
I'll be
perfectly
switching to
audible and
mobile
visible
network.
now.
Okay, there's a power cut at my end. So my Wi-Fi has gone for a toss. I'll be connecting to the mobile network. Okay. Yeah, sorry for that. So yeah, we were discussing about, or I was talking about the categories of cricket fans in this country, and if these people were have to had a discussion, whose opinion would make more sense, who would have a well qualified and specific opinion, and if you were a budding cricketer, whose opinion would you seek? I can see there are a lot of answers. Aditya, can you summarize them? Okay.
Yes, most of
Cricket.
our audience members have responded saying cricketers.
Cricketers, definitely, because they have a first-hand experience of the game, and also the readers and the analysts, as we say, they would also have a well-informed opinion, isn't it? And their opinion also makes sense. But if you compare it with them with the cricketers, the players, they would be a little diluted, their opinions. Why am I telling this? You must have this question: what is this to do with the session? I hope you have that question. Ladies and gentlemen, evaluation, if you look at it, at the core of it is an opinion. Evaluation at the end of the day is your opinion about a particular speech. Do you all agree? So, the better your understanding of the craft of public speaking, the better will be your opinion. As we just saw with our example of cricket, the more you understand about public speaking, the more knowledge you have about public speaking, or if you have experience in public speaking, your opinions will be well informed, well qualified, and they'll make more sense. Are you all with me till now? Okay, fine. So if you want to be a better evaluator, if you want to improve your evaluations, I would say to improve your knowledge of public speaking. Why to improve? Usually when I started out as a Toastmaster way back in 2000, exactly 5 years ago, that is in August 2015, by the way, I dreaded evaluation because evaluation was something that I I had convinced myself that I couldn't do this because I couldn't find the content. Whenever I was given the evaluation role, I couldn't find the content. I could just see few things, and which are very common, popular by the way, in terms of recommendation, commendation, is the eye contact, the stage movements, and the body language. I couldn't say anything beyond that in a speech, and I used to struggle with the content. What should I do? I used to have a lot of recommendations, but few commendations, and the recommendations also most of the times did not make sense. And when I looked at some senior Toastmasters in our club, we had a couple of DTMs. They would have a long list of verbose notes written with multiple mind maps, quadrants, and all sort of things happening. And that used to scare me. How are these people finding so much of a content from 5 to 7 minute speech? And I used to be astonished and amazed by this thing. They used to dissect and deconstruct the speech well. And then eventually I realized because they have a better understanding of public speaking, they used to do that. So if you have a good understanding of a speech, you will be able to dissect and deconstruct a speech deconstruct the thought process of the speaker that you are evaluating. Understand? For example, if a speaker, we'll take an example of the humorous speech, since we have that had that session before. In a humorous speech, if you now you understand what are the techniques that we need in a humorous speech so that it works, the humor works. And if you know them, and if you are evaluating a humorous speech, suppose, you can superimpose that techniques on that speech, metaphorically, and then see what all things worked. You can create a map. For example, as Harold suggested, you should have, for a joke to work, you should have a setup and then a punchline. Now you know that in the technique. Now for that, if you're evaluating a humorous speech, you can judge that speech based, or evaluate rather, not judge, evaluate the speech based on that particular guideline. Whether the jokes that the speaker made in the speech, did they follow this guideline? If yes, that becomes the commendation. If no, it becomes a recommendation. You understand? So that way, if you understand how a humorous speech should be, ideally, you will able to find the content other than body language and stage movement, which is very popular, by the way, for some reason, I don't know. And there is a disruption because of this online setup. It has taken away this recommendation of ours or commendation of ours, and we are left with nothing to talk about in an evaluation, which is a good thing in my opinion. So if you are able to, if you know the techniques, if you understand how should a speech should be, you will be able to find content, deconstruct and dissect it. And there are many things beyond delivery, by the way. In my experience, I have observed that most of the evaluators, they are inclined more towards delivery. There are very specific recommendations, like you should have for the speaker. For example, evaluator would suggest the speaker to station themselves on this corner of the stage, rather than being moving or positioned in the center for some reason. Now, does that really add a value to the speech or to the speaker? That is the question one should ask. And you should look beyond that, in my view. A speech begins by writing the content, isn't it? You first write the content, then you structure it, and then comes the delivery. So the writing portion, the structure, is the bedrock of any speech, is the foundation of any speech. So do you understand, as an evaluator, how a speech should be constructed? Do you know what are the guidelines that Toastmasters gives in terms of the construction or the structure of the speech? Do you have a good understanding of that? And second, do you understand what language should be used by a speaker? What are the guidelines that Toastmasters gives us? What should be the ideal language that should be used based on the context of the speech? So if you study these things, you will be able to see those things in the speech. Immediately you'll be able to observe those things, and that becomes the content. You understand? And then comes the delivery. Delivery also has many aspects to it. It's a very complex element of the speech, by the way. We talk about vocal variety many times. When evaluators just give a sweeping statement that you should have had a better vocal variety. If somebody gives me that recommendation, I ask, what do you mean by that? What does vocal variety mean by that? So vocal variety, as you might know, has volume, pitch, what else? Pause and pace, isn't it? So a well-informed speaker, he would say that you should have had a better pace for this portion of the speech. Now, for example, if a person is talking about being late to the office and his trials during trying to reach the office in time, he struggle, and he does not deliver it properly, the evaluator, who is well-informed, well-studied, would say that you should have spoken in a faster pace to create an urgency to show that you are late for the office. You understand? Not only I'm pointing out the specific vocal variety there, but I'm also qualifying it so as to why we should have that incorporated in the speech. So that brings us to the specific recommendations and observations. So if you understand the speech craft well, if you have read all your manuals your projects, you will be able to observe this instantaneously in a speech, and your recommendation would sound would sound impressive. In fact, you will develop a vocabulary of of a public speaking. You'll speak in a public speaking parlance. I hope you're following. What does that mean? For example, there is a recommendation on for in a speech, evaluator might observe that the speaker is asking questions to the audience, and in his evaluation, the evaluator might say, "You asked a lot of rhetorical questions to the audience. That was fantastic." However, if you have a good public speaking vocabulary, one would say you had a lot of points of reflection for the audience to reflect on the thought that you presented. And which one sounds more impressive, right? If you use the word reflection, that definitely shows your knowledge, and also it sounds more impressive and it has more credibility. You understand? So you have to, if you study the speech craft, you will develop that vocabulary, and also you will have contextual observations. What does that mean? Going back to our cricket example, there are 3 formats of cricket so far. One is the test match, the other is one-day cricket. I love one-day cricket, by the way, and there is T20. T20 is not cricket in my opinion, but that is a discussion for some other time. But these are the 3 formats of cricket, and we have different types of techniques for each of the formats. You cannot ask a person who's playing T20 to go and a batsman rather, to take his time to set, to be on the pitch and to gauge with the conditions and all, like we do in the test cricket or one day, right? He has to start from the word go. He has to start hitting. Same doesn't apply for the test match. In a test match, you cannot ask a batsman, suggest a batsman to start hitting from the word go. He has to set, he has to wear out the bowlers, isn't it? And so even if you understand what a speech is, you need to understand the context of the speech, and then you have to tailor your recommendations or commendations based on that particular context. To give another example, this is a little exaggeration, by the way. If somebody is talking about giving an obituary, and that is a very serious speech, by the way, so you cannot ask a person to include vocal variety in that. That would not make sense. You have to understand the context. And by the way, these elements, vocal variety, stage movements, your constructions, they are there to have that impact on the audience. And if the speaker has that requisite impact on the audience, without these elements, even then it's a good speech. You should not force anything there when the impact is there. And only a learned evaluator would be able to gauge whether the impact was there or not. Okay. So we'll have a contextual observations once we have better understanding of the speech craft. There are also different types of speeches, by the way. There's a speaking to inform, there is informative speeches, there are humorous speeches, there are motivational speeches, there are inspirational speeches, persuasive speeches, storytelling, entertaining. And each of these speech has different techniques, some advanced techniques to it, some different guidelines for each of this type. Are we all aware of it? Are we able to gauge what type of speech is it? And then accordingly, can we tailor our recommendations and commendations based on that? Can we analyze a speech based on what type of speech is it? That's also important. Once you start improving your knowledge, start reading about speechcraft, start listening to speeches, you'll start training your eyes and ears. You will definitely subconsciously develop this eye for these things in a speech, and definitely you will have better recommendations and better analysis and better commendation than an average evaluator. Are you all with me? Am I making sense? Okay, fine. So to reiterate, I would say, you know this meme, right? Prepare for evaluation? No. But improve. If you want to improve your evaluation skills, improve your knowledge of public speaking. Fine. Now, most of you might say, okay, this is very long-term sort of a thing. Like, It's a long, you're talking in the very long run, and our contest is in the next month. And how should we really incorporate these things? Now the question would be where to start. So you go back to the basics. As I go back to your traditional educational path, educational program in Toastmasters, there was a competent communicator manual. Go and study if you have not done already, or refresh your knowledge of the basics.
Hello, Toastmaster Ashraf Ali, are you there?
What language should a speaker use in the speech? What are the types of, how does a body language impact the speech? Read through the manuals to begin with. So at least you will have a basic understanding and a few more things to talk about. Now, for example, in the opening, if you people usually ask questions, and our speaker who has learned by observing others, evaluator who has learned by observing others, he would say, you started with a question that was fantastic, immediately grabbed the attention of the audience. A person who has read the manual, project number 2 would say, you started with a startling question. A startling question that immediately grabbed the attention of the audience. A startling means something which is surprising or astonishing or goes against the views of the audience. So if you use the word startling in your commendation, you will definitely stand out, won't you? So that is written in the manual. It's not my own thing. So if you start reading about it, you definitely find these nuances in the speeches. Second, if you are already well versed with the basics, read the advanced manuals from the traditional education program. You might have noticed that I am advocating the traditional program. That doesn't mean that I don't endorse the pathways. Actually, I don't. But anyway, the traditional program advanced manuals are, you'll find manuals for each and every type of a speech, that entertaining speeches for management, then there are storytelling, humorous speeches, and there are details. Every project lays down the details of every type of speech. So if you internalize these things, you understand these projects, you will be able to develop and train yourself to observe them in a speech. Aditya, am I making sense? Okay.
Yes, Toastmaster Ashraf, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Now this is all fine. Preparation before going on the field. Now what do we do when we are on the field? Isn't it? So Michael Jackson once famously said that all your plans go out of the window once you receive the first punch, right? So the real the game starts when the rubber meets the road, isn't it? So on the field, what do you do? There are 3 things that you can follow that worked for me so far. Is whatever things you have learned, try to observe them in a speech. Like I said, you can create a map of the things that ideally should be in a speech based on the type of the speech, and then what all the speaker did. So if the speaker followed that guideline, it becomes a commendation. Did not follow, it becomes a recommendation. As simple as that. Now, second is the technique. A technique is very important, and from the contest point of view. But I do not have any specific recommendations, and I would not like to give any suggestions on technique, because technique is something where you are only limited by your imaginations. You can be as creative as possible. However, there are few constraints for a technique. You should remember that evaluation at the end of the day is a speech. That means it should follow the structure and the guidelines of any speech. It should have an opening, body, conclusion, transitions. All the elements should be there in that speech. And second, you need to follow the CRC technique: commendation, recommendation, commendation. So that is why you need to develop your own technique, which should follow these constraints. There are few popular techniques that people usually follow. First is they have an analogy. Like in this session, I have an analogy with cricket. So that makes people understand better. And second is quotations. You can use quotes from different speakers, different eminent speakers, eminent people, and then you can use those quotes in your evaluation speech. So that also, these are very popular techniques, but however, you can develop your own technique. The more you practice, the more you read about speech, you will definitely find your own technique and maneuver ways. I won't discuss more on this. Now, this is pitfalls. There are certain pitfalls, mainly in terms of the contest. And this is where people usually, I have observed in my experience, that there are two things that go wrong. One is, since people haven't trained themselves to observe the different nuances or nitty-gritties in a speech, they try to premeditate. That means they go with certain suggestions that they, irrespective of what the speech would be, I am going to give these suggestions, or I am going to follow this technique, which is a double-edged sword, by the way. And more often than less, this doesn't work. I have a beautiful example for this. This is a real thing that happened. Don't ask me where. There was in an evaluation contest, there was a contestant who had come prepared with an analogy, like a specific analogy about baking cake. He'd say, I'm going to use this analogy where I'm going to compare the speech with the process of baking a cake, where all the ingredients go and how the cake becomes fluffy and all those flowery language. Okay, he was all prepared and he was pretty confident, but it wasn't his day. The test speaker, for some reason, had a speech about taking a dump. You understand? Taking a dump is relieving yourself at the beginning of the day. It was a bizarre speech. And now the speech was about you take dump every day. So you should regularly take dump in your life and you should emotionally cleanse yourself, something like that. Extremely weird if you ask me. But that was the speech. Now this guy had an analogy about baking a cake. And the speech is about taking a dump. These are two opposite, mutually exclusive things, if you ask me. How do you compare that? So this is what happens if you premeditate. You might find yourself in a pickle. Fun fact is, this person said, I have prepared this analogy. I haven't slept for the whole night. I am going to compare. And he went ahead and compared baking cake with taking a dump. And this evaluation speech was funnier than any of the speeches in the humorous speech contest. So be very careful when you premeditate. Of course, you can go with a framework. I'm not saying that you don't go with some preparation. Go with a framework. If it is going to be a speaking to inform kind of a speech, I look for these things, and then I'll be giving recommendations around these. But don't go with specific thoughts or specific things to talk about. Second is the time. Usually people start well and they are going well, but they get carried away. And then there is only 2 to 3 minutes that you get, 3 minutes, 30 seconds at the most. And suddenly people lose track of the time. There have been instances at the district, many veteran Toastmasters would agree, that the best evaluators, whom not only the judges, but also not only the audience, but also the judges were upbeat about, lost only because they went a few seconds over time. But they came back. You might be aware of those speakers. So if you're not tracking the time, if you're not mindful of the time, you might lose even if you give a good evaluation. So be very specific. Keep your evaluation concise. Develop a technique where you have a concise evaluation. For a speech, it is usually said that you shouldn't have more than 3 points. 5 points at the most. Don't cram everything in a speech or in an evaluation speech. Be mindful of that. So if you follow these techniques, you will be able to avoid these pitfalls. Okay, I think I have few minutes. Do I have? How much time do I have?
Toastmaster Ashraf, according to the agenda, we can take the Q&A, but we can go ahead for another 2 minutes and then go ahead with the session.
Okay, I have
Q&A session.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I haven't made sense through the entire session so far, all I would like you to do or request you to do is remember these things. In an evaluation, do not try to improve evaluation as such. Instead, improve your knowledge of public speaking. I hope that makes sense, resonates with you. Second is put your learning to practice. Develop an eye, observe those techniques that you have learned in a speech, and then prepare your speech or bake your speech, cook your evaluation speech around it. Develop your own technique. You can use analogies or you can use quotations, which are very common, by the way. But if you want to stand out, you have, in a contest especially, you have to develop your own technique and avoid pitfalls. Try not to premeditate, and be mindful of time. All right. So we'll before that, we'll quickly have the look at the judging ballot. I'll share the judging ballot quickly and see. Is my screen visible? Okay. So this is the judging ballot for the evaluation speech contest. It says analytical quality, you have around 40 marks, clear and focused. Again, most of the people who start out, in fact, they summarize the speech in the analytical section. Instead, if you have a better understanding, you'll definitely find those points. Your analytical quality will improve. You'll score more here. It says, refers to the effectiveness of an evaluation. Every evaluation should analyze strengths and weaknesses. So if you have contextual observations, you have specific recommendations, definitely you will be able to see the strengths and weaknesses based on the guidelines of Toastmasters. Understand? And second, you have recommendations. You need to have specific recommendations according to the ballots. If you understand the nitty-gritties of a humorous speech, you will definitely have specific recommendations for a humorous speech, as an example. Technique, again, technique is important. It's a speech, evaluation is a speech, and the one more constraint is CRC. You should be as sympathetic to the speaker as possible, right? And that should be your technique. So that is why we use analogies to make them understand, or quotations to make them understand, or motivate them. So if you follow that technique, you definitely score well on the technique front. And summation. Evaluation, as I said, is a speech. And in the conclusion, usually any speech, generally speaking, can be concluded with a summary of the speech. So if you have a well-defined, structured evaluation speech, you will definitely include the summary, and you will score well on the summary front. So far, whatever I've said, I think that is in line or aligns with the ballot, thankfully. Okay, I'll go back to the presentation. All right, so if you follow these suggestions, what will happen is you will start enjoying the speech in a different way. For example, I'd heard an interview of some famous filmmaker. He said, I don't enjoy the films like an average fan, but I enjoyed it in a different way. I see the camera angles, where the camera is positioned. I see how the editing has been done. I see how the actor has prepared. I could see that. And that way I enjoy it more. Not just get entertained, but I also see these techniques or the technicalities of the speech. And that is a different eye, he said. Similarly, if you follow these techniques, you will develop an eye for a speech, and you will enjoy the speech in a different way, from an evaluator's eye. And by the virtue of it, you'll always be an evaluator. You'll always be finding something in any speech you see, whether you are a designated evaluator or not, whether you're seeing a YouTube video, you'll definitely see those points. And I think if you want to really improve or be an evaluator who wins in a contest, you need to have that, you need to reach there. You should aspire to reach it. So you learn to evaluate, and then evaluate to learn, and the circle continues. And that is why I've named the session, learn to evaluate and evaluate to learn. I hope Ruchi and Aditya are now happy. I've met the objectives. Okay. Now, thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Are there any questions? I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Ashraf Ali. It was amazingly informative, and what a beautiful message you have given us today. Learn to evaluate and evaluate to learn. Can we have a tremendous round of applause for Toastmaster Ashraf Ali, please?
Thank you.
We do already have quite a few questions for you, Toastmaster Ashraf Ali. The first one is by Toastmaster Nikita Punjabi, and she says, how is evaluation in a regular meeting different from evaluation in a contest?
So if you ask me, there shouldn't be any distinction between an evaluation in a regular speech or in a regular meeting and then in a contest. However, there are some things in a contest you are competing against different contestants. You'll be compared with them. So usually, what people do, or what I have observed and learned, is the content is going beyond the obvious. For example, Toastmaster Ruchi was the test speaker for this contest, and it was a humorous speech, a wonderful speech. I loved her speech. However, her speech did not have a message as such. And as far as I remember, none of the contestants pointed that out. So everybody was going beyond the obvious. They wanted to stand out in some way. So with that aspect, I think there is a subtle difference between an contest evaluation and a regular evaluation. But ideally, it shouldn't be. The evaluation should be an evaluation. Your objective should be to point out specific recommend feedback. You should give feedback to the speaker so that he improves. I hope I've answered the question. Nikita herself is a seasoned evaluator, so if she agrees, then I think I've done a good job.
Yes, thank you, Toastmaster Ashraf. The next question is from distinguished Toastmaster Shirish. He asks, is it better to limit the recommendations to 2 or 3?
Yeah, that's a great question, DTM Shirish. Yes, definitely. Like any speech, as the Toastmaster guidelines suggest, or the traditional program CC2, organize your speech in competent communicator. The guideline is you should have 3 points or at the most 5 points in any speech. A speaker audience cannot remember beyond that. So it's good, or it's ideal to have 3 points in commendation and 3 points in recommendation. However, if you wish to elaborate more on each of the points, then you can restrict it to 2. But the recommendation should be more, in my view, than the commendations, because the recommendations is where the speaker would be able to improve. Commendation is just to set the stage so that he listens to us. He's not offended. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, thank you, Toastmaster Ashraf. The next question is actually from Toastmaster Gauri Dikshit from Nagpur Toastmasters Club. She asks, if as an evaluator you feel that the speech was flawless and there are no recommendations to give, what do you do in such cases? How do we go about it?
That's a good question. Many of us go blank because see, as I said, an evaluation is an opinion, and the better you understand the amount of knowledge you have about the craft of public speaking, your evaluation will be according to it. So if you have an advanced level skills as public speaker, or if you have advanced understanding of public speaking, you will definitely find something to recommend in a speech. Usually in a perfect, so-called, or near perfect speech, there won't be recommendation, there won't be any glaring gaps. There would be nice to have things. You might go with the nice to have. Okay, this is a good speech, and this was a good motivational speech. What does a motivational speech have, which will nice to have? Like, there could be a motivational speech should have more emotional appeal than rather the logical appeal. So you can find those things. There is always something to see. Either there are recommendations or there are observations. You'll always find something. So you need to see, again, go back to the basics, understand what the guideline suggests, and then you'll definitely find something.
Yes, thank you, Toastmaster Ashraf. The next question is from Toastmaster Ruchi. She asks, we have seen many evaluators repeat some of the content from the speech, and somewhere it eats out the time from the evaluation. So what is your recommendation on this one? How do we go about it?
Yes, that happens in the analysis portion of the speech. Usually we summarize the speech first to analyze. That may work sometimes if you have specific, if you rephrase it in your own, paraphrase it rather. But it's better to, as the ballot suggested, you have to point out the strengths and weaknesses. So in a contest setup, and that too as you go higher, you are risking your chance of making it in a speech contest, because you'll be compared with other speakers and they might not might have specific observations. So you need to observe, you need to have that meta look at the metadata in the terms of programming of that speech. What is that thing that the user has done? You need to deconstruct the thought process, as I said. Like in the movie example I gave, you should be able to see, if you're looking at the movie, you should be able to see where the camera was positioned. Was it a shaky camera, or are they following that actor? So you should be able to gauge that. You should have that eye. Unless you have that, the low-hanging fruit, as they say, is to summarize the content. I hope I have answered the question.
Yes, thank you, Toastmaster Ashraf. I would request to pass a motion to extend the meeting by 5 minutes, because we have just one question remaining and also the vote of thanks. So motion to extend the meeting by 5 minutes. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. So Toastmaster Ashraf, the next question is from Toastmaster Muazzam, and he says, some people suggest that more than the technique or framework when we are evaluating, we should be actually concentrating on giving recommendations to the speaker to become a better speaker, rather than concentrating on being the winner of the contest or something like that. So what are your thoughts and your opinions on this one? What do you suggest?
Okay, if I had to sum it, so you're saying you have an option of playing to the galleries or being true to the role of an evaluator, if I'm not wrong.
Exactly.
It's a fine balance you have to strike. See, in an evaluation contest setup, contest is a comparison, right? You will be compared. If I were a judge in a contest, I'll find out who is the best, and then for the rest of the speakers, I'll compare it with him. So if you have to stand out, you have to play to the galleries to some level. But the objective shouldn't be lost in this case. What happens is, people, like in case of analogies, I've seen that people get carried away, and the evaluation speech is more about the analogy rather than focus more on the analogy rather than the objective where you want to improve the speaker. So it should be a fine balance, definitely. That comes with practice, I think. DTM Mukta ma'am and DTM Shirish and all other DTMs will agree. It's a fine balance, and it comes with practice. So practice more. And Toastmaster Muazzam himself, I have looked up to him. So I think this was a trick question to put me in a spot. just kidding, anyway.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Ashraf Ali, once again for the thoroughly entertaining and informative session. A round of applause again for Toastmaster Ashraf Ali. I'm afraid due to the positive time, we'll limit the questions to these, and please feel free to let us know your questions. We will ask the panelists offline and get back with the answers. All right. I think, like both of our panelists today pointed out, and also like most of the legends tell us, the contests are won during the time of preparation and during the time of learning. So the 1 month time that we have, let us focus on learning, preparing, scripting our speeches, rehearsing our deliveries, and becoming a better version of speakers of ourselves, and also becoming better people. And Toastmaster Ashraf Ali and Toastmaster Harold, I'm sure you have given us a direction to align our thought processes and our efforts to become a better speaker. So thank you so much once again to the panelists. And with that, we wish you all a very happy preparation time, a very happy learning time. Do get up, put on your shoes of humor and evaluation skills, and wishing you a fantastic learning experience. With that, I would now hand over the control to Toastmaster Ruchi Acharya for the vote of thanks. Toastmaster Ruchi, over to you.
Thank you, Toastmaster Aditya. I'm sure that I speak on behalf of everyone gathered here today when I say that we have been witnesses to a masterclass on how to approach humorous speeches and on evaluation of speeches. What a splendid session we have just concluded. Delivering a humorous speech is by no means an easy feat. Humorous speeches are like a fine meal. The balance of ingredients makes it savory, but a little excess of anything makes the experience sour. It is no wonder that countless Toastmasters have spent endless hours trying to master their artistry in producing that speech which strikes a perfect balance and leaves the audience all smiles. Today, Toastmaster Harold Fernandez laid threadbare before us the nuances of this art. The aha moments obviously kept us flowing throughout the session. And I'm sure it will help us produce out-of-box speeches at the upcoming contest. We thank Toastmaster Harold for giving us the much required confidence. Coming to the evaluation. Evaluation is not merely enumerating what went wrong and what went right. It's an empowering tool, a means to encourage the speaker to look at those areas where they are yet to attain full potential and to capitalize on their strengths. And Toastmaster Ashraf Ali today broke down the otherwise seemingly complex task of evaluation. With the contest approaching sooner, it had become even more important to understand how similar or how different is it. We thank Toastmaster Ashraf Ali for meticulously compressing and delivering to us such an enormous amount of your experiences and inputs. Next, I would like to thank distinguished Toastmaster Mukta Nadkar for being an endless and tireless support to Deccan Toastmasters Club, perhaps also introducing us to the creme de la creme of speakers today. Thank you, Toastmaster Pradeep Surale, for being an excellent Zoom master and ensuring that the session runs smoothly. And finally, to all our members and guests, the fuel that keeps us going. I would like to thank you all for being such meditative listeners and for the fantastic questions. This has allowed us to achieve the benefits of collective synergy, I must say. I, Toastmaster Ruchi Acharya, on behalf of the ExCom, hope that you all benefit from the session and make the most of it. Wish you all the luck for the contest that is approaching soon. And thank you so much once again. And for now, we can conclude the session and begin with our fellowship. Well, before I wrap this up, can we all pose for a group photograph? Still waiting. Okay, I can still see a few videos on off. Okay. Smile, please, everyone. Give me a moment. Hold on to your smiles, please. Okay, I have another page to go. Yes, that's it. Thank you for exercising your muscles.
Okay,
Is the meeting
Aditya.
adjourned?
So
Yes.
Good job. Good sessions. Thank you very much, both Harold as well as Ashraf Ali.
Oh,
It was very nice.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Harold,
Thanks for
Ashraf,
having us.
fantastic job. Thank you so much. I
Welcome,
think
man.
you've
Thanks for inviting me.
inspired our members.